Welcome. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm going to talk through the five-step process of business model innovation that I use. So let's get straight into it. So, why do you need to do business model innovation? Basically, there are a number of cases. You've got an existing business model, a business that is no longer performing because the market has changed, the environment has changed. Technology, new entrants, new demographics. Lots of things have changed about it, and the business model no longer works. Another case is somebody's the business has been run down, been badly mismanaged, and you need to have a big framework to sort of step in, bring it up to date, and turn it around. Startups coming up with brand new business models from scratch to go in and enter a market and disrupt companies themselves. Slightly different process for them, but many of the same steps here. And again, startups that have tried, that haven't managed to get product market fit and need to pivot and change their direction. Finally, for large companies, bringing in a new product or a new business unit and figuring out what is going to be the best model to go out and penetrate the market. So with no further ado, we'll start off and we'll have a look at the business model canvas. The business model canvas is a very simple graphical representation of how the business works. I like it fundamentally because it is very simple, very clear. You can lay out exactly how a company works in a single page. It's visual, so it's awesome for those people who don't like or don't have time to read hundreds of pages of text, and there's a great deal of nuance that you can put in. This is a schematic business model canvas. Up here in the right hand side we have the customers. These are all your different customer segments, and these are the value propositions that you offer to customers. And offering the value proposition to customers, you generate revenue. You reach the customers via particular channels, and you maintain the customer relationship so they like you and they keep coming back and buying more. How do you achieve the sales to the value proposition? Well, to start with, you need a number of key resources. These key resources are delivered through key activities. The key activities actually create the value proposition out of the key resources, and you may have key partners involved who help you deliver the key activities or provide some of the key resources. And all this, of course, comes with a cost. And that fundamentally gives you a very quick, very simple understanding of your business model, but it allows you to analyze it with a great deal of complexity and understanding and keep on drilling down. And this is the baseline for all the work that I do. It's a high level of abstraction. So it gets rid of a lot of the details that cause confusion and disruption and long arguments, and say, okay, this is where we are. What is it like? And so the next step, so this, it acts as a baseline. So the next step in looking at the business model is to jump in and have a look at how your business model is performing. So most companies have a plethora of KPIs and metrics and measurements. You may use something like the balanced scorecard. You may use dashboards in other ways. The fundamental thing about all these is that they are measuring the performance of the company. When you're looking at business model innovation, it's less useful to look at the whole company, but more useful to be actually looking at the performance of the business model and components of the business model. So in this example, I'm looking at a segment by segment basis, but in actual programs and in workshops with clients, we drill down to the actual level of the process. And so what we do is either subjectively with managers, how do you think this part's going? And they'll give feedback and their feeling based on all their intuition and the metrics that they've internalized, or we draw back and we quantify it and use the metrics themselves. And every process in the business model canvas can usually be mapped back to the metrics. So in this case, the performance in the customer segment isn't great. and neither is the value proposition. So you're selling something that customers don't want to people who really don't like your company, but yeah, you're making a reasonable amount of money. It's not growing, it's not performing that well, but it's okay. Your channels, how you reach your customers, how you're distributing the value proposition to them is working pretty well, and there are no major problems with the with your customer relationship. On the back end, you haven't got the resources, or there are big problems with the way that the resources are performing, but your key activities, you're pretty good at execution in this case, and you've got a bunch of key partners, key suppliers who have really got your back. However, the cost basis of the company is pretty poor, and you can see very quickly we've able to establish how well the business model is performing, and you can start then asking interesting questions about why this is happening. Is the revenue here being kept up by the excellent marketing channels? Is it here? Why is the value proposition so poor? Is it because we've actually got a great one, but we're selling it to the wrong customers, or have we got the right customers and totally the wrong value proposition because we're using the wrong resources? So there's a lot of questions that you can start asking here that delve you down into the fault analysis and understand why the business model is not performing. And this gives a lot of insight that can then immediately be taken away to line managers for them to start optimizing and improving their functions, because they're able to see the whole big picture rather than breaking it down into silos and seeing just their own part. They see how everything connects together. So the next section is looking at the business model threats and the market disruption. This is now looking external to the company. What are the factors in the market, in the environment, that are going to be making parts of the business model hard to deliver? What are the things causing some of the low performance that we saw in the previous slide? So again, we start off with the generic model that we got in step one. We're not doing any innovation yet. We're trying to give a situational analysis to understand the position that the business model is in the market. And there are lots of things going on in the market: threats of disruption, actual disruption, demographics are changing. And here again, we go through, we map out how significant the threats are. You can either do this on an actual basis, on a potential basis. You can use a risk matrix, so frequency versus severity of the threats in the business model, and very much that depends on each customer's particular needs. And so we run through this again, and we see how well the business model is threatened. And here again, there is a lot of threats coming in, and this is increasingly true for businesses. The rate of market change, new product and innovation, rate of change of demographic cohorts, the change from millennials to centennials, before a lot of companies have even got the grasp of how to market to millennials, for example. Global warming, climate change, new technologies coming out with entirely new skills, and old skills becoming obsolete and difficult to recruit people to fill those. So here we've mapped and sort of say, okay, this is showing us that the business model is very much under stress, under pressure. And for a company that's had a business model for 50 or 100 years, this is very, very threatening. This is an existential threat because they're not used to the change. So we run 60 to do this. We run 60 separate stress tests against over all 9 segments. We look at the disruption pressures of the market and competition, but it's always very much focusing on the big fit picture to make this clear. And one of the interesting things that you can do, not all clients want, or not all customers want this, but many do, is to step outside the framework, the groupthink of your own company, and start running the same process on competitors. So you're very quickly able to map out what their business models look like, what their performance is. I mean, you don't have a clear picture of that, but you have something to go on, and you can fill in many of the gaps. And then also, how are the stresses and the threats and the disruption in the market affecting them? And this gives a lot of insight that again can be immediately fed back into the marketing and the line of the operations teams, and also it feeds through into a later stage of the business model innovation process, where we think about what is possible. At the moment, this is mapping out the environment. For many companies, this is the red ocean, and it's, if we know what all the other sea life, the sharks in the red ocean are like, it's far easier to figure out how we're either going to hunt them or get away into a much bluer environment with clear water. Okay, the next step in the business model innovation process is looking at the change makers and the structural innovation. In many cases, corporate innovation, corporate change programs sort of just bam, they hit the wall, because what the strategy teams come up with is not implementable, because there is a great deal of resistance in the organization. And we see it as two different types of resistance fundamentally. There is the resistance from the people. They're either like being conservative or they're change makers, and often in many companies you'll find pockets of change change makers associated with different parts of the business model. You'll also find parts of the business that are very rigid, sclerotic, that are highly resistant to change, partly because of the culture of the people who work there, but partly also because the managers there have been very competent, and they've done what managers are meant to do, and to reduce costs, to improve performance, and cut all the fat off processes. So they are very fragile, very just in time, very resistant to change. And so again, we map out the different parts of the business model and how resistant they are to change. So here we can say, see that some suppliers and partners are resistant, they're not happy about going forward, but others are really excited about the new opportunities. Costing, again, there are big cost savings. Parts of the business are thinking, aha, this is where we're going to be able to make a lot of saving. Others think, well, we're going to be writing off huge amounts of our intellectual property or our existing assets or infrastructure, and this is going to be a big problem. Managers often don't like it because the hard work they put into building efficient and effective systems and processes is now got to be junked, replaced with new things that are not going to be inefficient. So they're seeing their life's work in some cases abandoned, but it has to be replaced. And so this gives us an overall picture of how easy different parts of the business model are to change, and then that gives us again a baseline of what is possible in your business that you can do to change it. So step 5 is coming on to the actual business model innovation, and this is what people think is often the first step. No, it's not the first step. You need to have a very clear, very detailed situational understanding so that you can come into this space, because having gone through here, we know what our business model is, how it's performing already, we know the threats that it faces, and how our competitors are responding to those threats, both from us and from the environment, and we know how our business model can be changed and how people within it are going to respond to change. So now we can come up with new components in the business model, new customer segments, new channels to market, new value propositions. We can create new resources, and again, this is one of a number of business models that we will generally come up with at this stage, depending on the customer and what they ask for. We will often come up with 3, 5 or 10, and then a way of scoring each of the different business models to help the corporation achieve their vision and their objectives for going forward. So this is the 5-step business model innovation process that I use. It's very, very effective. It provides a lot of value as we go through it to the corporation, helping make tactical and operational changes to different divisions, different components of the business, and helping them to improve their performance because they know more. And it's critical that there is a mechanism for passing these insights back out to the businesses, either through having them actually in the workshops and in the businesses, or by making sure that these insights are communicated out to them. And then it also provides great insight into what business models are possible and which the company can then invest its time and money to developing, testing out the ideas. Do they work? Have they got any legs? Validating that they're able to scale, and then finally investing the resources that are going to take them up to the level of 50, 70, 90, 200% of the existing business model, as one or more of them replace the core business model that has done you so well for the last decades or half century or century in many cases. So my name is Denis Oakley. I'm a business model strategist. I spend my whole time generating business models, looking at how to use them to stimulate corporate innovation and move forward and not get caught and killed by market changes and market disruptions. If you're interested in working with me, or would just like to learn more, or ask me questions about how I do this, reach out to me. It's www.denis-oakley.com, one N in Dennis, or email me at denis-oakley.com. Denis@denis-oakley.com. Great, and thanks for listening.